I've said it before. I don't know if it's a direct quote and I thought it up or not, but I've said when you can lie about money, you can lie about anything. Because money touches every society, every nation state, whether they're using rupees or yuan or dollars or pesos. Everyone worries about their money.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for July 28th through August 4th, 2025, while supplies last. This week we feature 1 ounce gold UK Britannia at just $59 over spot per ounce. 1/10 ounce gold US Eagles are just $47.99 over melt per coin. 1 ounce silver South African Krugerrand are just $2.79 over spot per ounce. And 10th ounce platinum UK Britannia are just $34 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend David Morgan from the Morgan Report. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Elijah, great to be back. Thanks.
Well, it's great to have you, and I think a great time to have you as well. Being an expert in the silver market, I did want to ask you, what you think is happening in precious metals right now. Obviously, we've seen such strength in the metals over the last few months, and we've talked to that with you. But we're also seeing a bit of a pullback over the last couple of days. Do you anticipate this being kind of just short term, or has there been a change of trend recently?
I would say you could call it a change of trend. I mean, from my perspective, and you want to call it analysis, I think we have peaked temporarily. I mean, first of all, I said that at gold at 3,500 a couple months back, and I wrote, for our premium service that gold would be doing a trading range throughout the summer and possibly longer. And I also said that during that point in time, it would be good to either trade gold for platinum or silver, or if you wanted to add your positions, add platinum, add silver, and both those metals took off relative to gold. So in other words, gold stayed basically steady state, and both platinum and palladium recently have all shot up. However, I think they have hit that point that gold did a few months back, meaning that they are going to establish a range for a while. I think how long, I don't know yet. I haven't seen enough data, but I would just guess probably through the end of the summer. For example, we're end of July. August is usually the worst month or best month, depending on how you look at it, for gold. In other words, usually the cyclical low for gold is established in August. So that's another month out. And then September, the old adage, sell in May and come back after Labor Day. That's usually about the third week of September. So I would guess, from historic precedent, we would see probably all four metals move in a trading range from here, probably for a couple months at a minimum. Obviously, something could hit. But most of the news that's favorable to the metals is already kind of put into the price. And I know everyone's thinking there's very little resistance for silver from, 39 up. But hit 39 briefly, and now it's dropped off about $1, he said. So that's it. Sideways is what I expect. Doesn't mean the bull market's over. It's really healthy for markets to consolidate and build another base and move up. I made that comment on another interview recently. And what you really don't want is a higher price every day, and then you get into a parabolic move. Those are not sustainable. But if you staircase up, you build a base at 32, then it jumps up to 34, and you build a base there. And then it jumps up to 36, and you build a base there. Of course, that's an idealized base because, they go up and down. But basically speaking, if you look at the charts, that's kind of what it looks like, a stair. And those are pretty stable because you have a base. So then you have a support level. Then you move up and you build another support level. So that's what I'm looking at.
No, I know there's been some in some sense, good news about the trade wars, some deals being made with Japan and the EU. Do you see that having any long-term impact on the price? I know the prices are off slightly because of that news, though, in the metals.
Well, as we both know, the the tariff situation is like playing 21 at Las Vegas. You could keep rolling the dice over and over and coming up with a different number. But on the basis of what you asked me, yeah, I think there's a little more stability, a little more reconciling what these tariffs are really going to look like, and a little more solidity to the proposition that, here's what we're going to do. And you can kind of like depend on that. So, yeah, I think markets hate instability. They hate the unknown. So even though tariffs might not be suitable to the counterparty that has to pay them, once they are established and consistent and they know what they're going to be for some, time frame, then the market can kind of, take that in and work with it.
We've also seen, in some sense, the mainstream jumping in here, various banks projecting $4,000 gold, in the next year or so. Your take on that, and I guess, what is your take on the mainstream narrative out there? It seems like some people are looking at gold, but it's not like everyone is jumping in at the moment.
Yeah, I think we're at again, that trading range. And that's what I call an indecision pattern. It's kind of equal bulls and equal bears. No one's really winning. The bears win and the market goes down $100. The bulls win and it goes up $100. I'm referring to gold. And that means that just what I said. So what's going to take it to 4,000? Well, the bulls have to win. There has to be more buying pressure than selling pressure. What would cause that? Well, there's a number of things. But most are out there already. The war situation, Middle East, Ukraine hasn't gone away, flare-ups in Pakistan that have cooled off. So all of those things that are really favorable to an increase in gold prices are already there and pretty well known. So what's going to take it to the next level? And that would probably be something in the financial sphere where we have, let's say another bond auction and no one shows up, as an example, where, yields are actually forced higher because demand is nothing. So to sweeten the deal, prices, their yield gets pushed higher. And that's just an idea. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just giving you an example. But I am still of the mindset that it will get there, but maybe not as easily as we went from the 2000 level, which we finally broke through and hit 3,500 pretty quickly. I think we're going to need to kind of work this base and then go higher. $500 more is a nice move, but nothing like the $1,500 that we saw from the 2000 level. Eventually, I think we're going to see even higher than 4,000, but I'm writing a report right now, and depending on the overall global economic climate and what happens in the, I would say, non-reality, the stock market indexes. There's a gentleman that most of our viewers would probably be familiar with, Charles Nenner. And Nenner is very, very bold in his predictions, but he's also very accurate. And for an example, if we went from the high level of the Dow right now down to 5,000, for an example, thought experiment. David, it's never going to happen. I'm not that bold. I don't know the future. And gold made it to 5,000. Well, that would be a very interesting place to contemplate, because many in our peer group talk about the gold to Dow ratio. And when the gold to Dow ratio hits 1, that's a pretty good sign that we've hit a top in the gold market, or conversely, a bottom in the stock market. I'm not saying that's going to happen. What I'm trying to convey, and I want to convey very strongly, is that the price of gold is what most everyone focuses on. But really, you want the value of gold. And this is something that Mike Maloney does very well. He talks about how much of a house do you get for an ounce of gold, how many barrels of oil, how many bushels of wheat, how much of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And so if you thought about, let's say, a contraction in the economy and the housing prices came down nationwide, we just use the U.S. for an example, let's say 1/3, but gold went up by that $2,000 or $1,500 from 3,500 to 5,000. So you got that increase in gold, and you got a decrease in the housing market, or maybe the bond market, or the stock market, or the automobile market, which is suffering badly. So you have to look at it in terms of what do I get for that? So it's not always a function of price. That's what we're taught to think, and we think prices all the time. But really, I think a better and more accurate measure is to look at what it buys in terms of other hard assets.
I think that's so key. And we did just have Andy Scheckman on the show, and he was talking about how, when priced in gold, housing is very affordable. It's actually as affordable as it's been for a long time, or even ever here. And it's funny because, and my dad also, who was interviewing him, was mentioning that when you look at the mainstream media, they're looking at kind of surface level things, which gives you a distortion of what's really happening. They're talking about how housing is completely unaffordable, and they're talking about how stocks are rising and everything. But we're talking about this with reference to a depreciating currency. So obviously housing prices are rising. Obviously the stock market is rising if the dollar is falling. But what you're talking about is really pricing things in gold. I think that just gives people really a more clear perspective of what's really happening here.
Well, I think a lot of, I know, my people that follow me, whether they're, paid members or not, I mean, they look at, some of us that have a pretty good track record for guidance. I wouldn't say, I don't have a crystal ball. I certainly have made some good calls. I've made some errors. But I think that you got to be objective in this business. It's hard because there's so much emotion around money to begin with, let alone sound money and the argument for, truth in the financial system, which is rare. But with all that aside, you have to stay realistic. And, to put a number out there of, 600 or 1,000 or whatever for silver, you can do whatever you want. I'm free market. That's free market thinking. And maybe in terms of how much the currency's depreciated, that would be the real price. But the market knows more than anybody. And the market is manipulated. It is been proven, but I don't want to go down that path right now. What I want to do is reiterate what you said, Elijah, and that is what really got me more solidified as I'll call myself a gold bug. I don't really consider myself that, but I'll use that moniker, was The Invisible Crash by James Dines, one of the first books I read on hard money. And what he pointed out was that the stock market keeps making larger and larger numbers, but in terms of gold, it's actually going down. And that's a real eye-opener. And I said that on your father's last time your dad interviewed me. And I really enjoyed, speaking that. And he actually wrote me back, said, David, I'm not seeing that. The AI is not telling me that. So I got a chart for him and I sent it to him. I said, well, there you go. There's the proof. But this is part of the manipulation is, it's I won't say it's mind control, but it's propaganda. Because if you have a constant, gold's a constant, then that measures everything. And a dollar is not a constant. In fact, what is the price of gold? It's just showing you the depreciation of the dollar or the paper currency versus something that is constant, an ounce of gold. And so, again, I'm glad we're having this discussion because I think it's a good fundamental place or a foundational point that people need to kind of redigest, perhaps. Speaking for myself, get a better handle on what do I really want to focus on? Do I want to focus on $10,000 gold, or do I want to focus on where is the economy? What does it buy? How valuable is it? Heck, if we're buying houses, as Andy said, for this, a good price vis-a-vis gold, and let's say you could buy 2 houses for that same amount of gold, hey, wake up and see the light. Gold's probably overpriced at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I like about our channel name, and something that whenever I've hosted a channel that I've been a part of, one of the things that I've thought about is, it's not going to be gold and silver always, right? So I don't want a gold and silver in the name of the channel because it's going to be something else eventually. I mean, I think it's good to have some portion of our savings, right, in gold and silver, and maybe pass those on to the next generation. But it's just kind of, at least in my opinion, the place to be right now. But we look at those ratios, the how many ounces of gold or silver it takes to buy a house, how many ounces for, compared to the Dow. And I think that will give us a clearer indication than just the price of gold or the price of the Dow or price of houses for when we would want to actually switch into a different asset class.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just add on to that. I mean, holding, precious metals, something I've advocated since before I began on the internet. But it's part of your portfolio. In other words, that's my specialty. That's what I advocate, and I'll give you the reasons why. But really, if we want to benefit, that paradox of, a win-win situation where your investments are helping you to have a better lifestyle, and at the same time, what you invested in is also helping society with a better lifestyle or cleaner air, better water, better food, easier way of doing things, better communications, whatever it is. That's the paradox. You can, as a true capitalist, you can benefit yourself and society at large. And that's largely what I want to be on. I want to be on that where we're helping each other with, our, let's say, wise choices with what we invest in. However, when you get in a distorted situation like we've been in for many decades now, and really it happened before August 15th, 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, because we were lying before then. And that's why he closed the gold window. We said the dollar's as good as gold, but it hadn't been for a long time. Basically got caught and said, I got to stop that contract. I'm closing the gold window, as we refer to it. So the point is, we've got to come back to those basics. And you're right, there will be a time. Now, from my perspective right now, I think we're still going toward a system that's being pushed or propagandized, if that's a word, into a system of more control, not less. And the more freedom the people have with their money, the more freedom we have overall. And the more control the bankers have of the money, the more control they have overall. So I think we're at a nexus where there's a lot of people like you that have dedicated your life since, I think, age 16. I've done it most of my life to get the ideology out that, there is a direct correlation between free market economics and freedom versus some other system that really controls the system. And so we are at a very interesting point in history, but I'm just going to circle back and say you're correct. There will be a new one. And it's not necessarily the one that we have been taught about, and I've talked about, the CBDCs or a private version of the CBDC. I think that is the push. I think that's what they want. I've talked about it. I've been consistent about it. But I also hopefully have said it enough that just because that's what they want does not mean that's what's going to take place.
We've talked about on this channel as we sometimes go into a philosophical angle when we speak with you. We've talked about kind of the morality of a society as you turn to a fiat currency, and you've been posting quite a bit about how when society makes money or currency a god, that really distorts everything else and everything becomes permissible. Can you talk a little bit about this and what we're seeing right now? As obviously we live in a fake financial system, and really people are often valuing currency or money above anything else.
Well, I give it a shot. I was pretty inspired here the last couple of months. I mean, it was the 4th of July, and I was I guess I was riding myself fairly hard, meaning that, what have I accomplished what I've wanted to achieve, which is to educate people enough for them to make up their own darn mind whether or not the system that we have is one that they would have chosen freely or not. And so I wrote that piece about, money and on the 4th of July, money and freedom, basically. And then I was inspired again to talk about, how much our faith, from my perspective, has been diminished over the last few decades. And where's the faith now? And the faith is it's not in God, it's in the other God. And what's that? Primarily it's money. And so I just took off on that theme and thought, what does it really do? And so when you put your faith in, let's say, a false idol, then it revolves around value. And the propaganda is extremely good at this. I'm writing about it in the Morgan Report this month about the U.S. economies run 70% on the consumer. That's kind of ridiculous, but that's our economy. And so we look for things outside of ourselves. So you've heard me say this before, Elijah, but always look for what you have, not what you have. And what I mean by that statement, I look for what you have as an individual as far as your integrity, your character, your moral values, your worldview, what you bring to the game rather than what you can get from it. That's your internal self. That's your relationship with whatever higher power you want to believe in or not. But it's your integrity. It's your authentic self. And what we're taught is what you have, which is everything external to you. You know, what kind of car do you have? What kind of house? What kind of yacht? Who are your friends? What's your selfie look like? What's your social media profile look like? What kind of meals do you have? I mean, people take pictures of their meals and put it on social media. I mean, I'm not going to, if I'm free market, you're free to do that. And you are. To me, it's it's a little interesting, you know, but this is the society we have. So we're looking outside of ourselves for that fulfillment, which you'll never get. You're going to get it from the heart outward. It's how big a heart do you have? I mean, some of the greatest stories ever told have to do with the underdog that has a big heart and is able to overcome all kinds of obstacles and move forward. So hopefully that's summarized it in a way that people can understand what my true meaning was in that piece, because I've seen it happen more and more as I've gotten older and older, and I'm just calling them as I see them. And you'll find as you get older, Elijah, I know you're still, you know, quite young, at least relative to me, but you will, or I will speak for myself, but you get a little more crotchety, which means you're a little more edgy and you're more prone to speak out a little harsher maybe than you were in the past, because, you know, the political correctness is waning more and more, I'll say.
It is interesting. It seems like and Rafi Farber has talked about this as well, that as we introduce, I guess, falsity or untruth into the system, like with the fiat currency, right, that then can, people start accepting that, right, as truth, or they accept fake currency as real currency. And then that distortion can kind of lead to distortions in other areas of life as well. So I think, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, we can't, you know, have this, we can't make gold and silver God in any sense. But I think if we live our financial lives more based in reality instead of based in the matrix, I think that's a good step forward in really correcting that area of our life. And then also, you know, a good step towards correcting other areas as well. But your take on that?
Well, I agree. I think it's a transition. I mean, it comes down to trust. I used the word faith a minute ago. I mean, people, rather than having faith in God, have faith in a currency, and the currency is a false faith. We know that. Faith in gold and silver isn't really anything more than something that people have trusted for thousands of years, and it can't be inflated away. So I think that's a transition where we all get back on the same page and say, okay, look, here's the problem. We couldn't trust our government to keep a currency stable. We can trust a gold coin is going to always be a gold coin of this weight. And today I value it for that much of a house or that much of bushels of wheat or whatever it be. And that brings us back to kind of a universal platform of understanding true value. And from that, we could go into, you know, a betterment, you know, across the board in society at large, because, you know, I've said it before. I don't know if it's a direct quote and I thought it up or not, but I've said when you can lie about money, you can lie about anything, because money touches every society, every nation state, whether they're using rupees or yuan or dollars or pesos. Everyone worries about their money, and they worry about it as far as, you know, they're making enough of it. And if they have a lot of it, they worry about, you know, are they going to lose it, or who's their real friends? Because they're so rich, they don't really know if they're getting interaction from people that really want to be with them or with their money. That's kind of sad in all those things. So I think getting back to basics is really important. I still look at the precious metals, as I said a moment ago, as being probably a transition to the next system. And the next system, in my view, doesn't have to be, you know, a digital-based track, trace, and tax system that's being outlined for us constantly, it could be one much, much better than that.
Before we let you go, David, I did want to discuss one last topic with regard to the metals. Gold and silver are really seen as real money, right? And platinum is kind of its own creature in and of itself. So, but you've also been posting a lot on platinum as we've seen this huge run up this year, 50% or so. You've talked about the tightness in the platinum market. Do you want to kind of expand a bit on that, what you're seeing in this very, very tiny market?
Yeah, I could just say a few words. First of all, platinum and palladium actually do hold the exact requisites for a classic money. They're scarce, they're divisible, they're fungible, all those things, but they are not considered money by even hard money advocates such as myself. However, there are opportunities in those two metals, and I want to just bring them to the fore. I've thought for years, Elijah, why are these two metals even on the futures exchange? They are such a small market, and they really could be a cash market only. I mean, as I've said before, maybe not on your show, but you used to have eggs and milk on the futures exchange, and both of them were taken off because, those are basically cash markets. Do the prices of eggs and milk change? Yes, they do. Can you be hedged? Yes, you can. You don't need a futures exchange to make a hedge. So that to me would be a more correct way, if I could say that, for platinum and palladium. But nonetheless, it is on the futures exchange. They are very tight. The outlook for both metals is, in theory, let me say it twice, in theory, you could run out of metal in a few years. That won't happen. The market will correct it. But nonetheless, still see opportunities in all four metals. But again, I think we need to consolidate further before that happens.
Well, as always, it'll be very interesting to continue to track this with you, David. If our viewers are interested in learning more, they can go to themorganreport.com. And I also understand you're quickly rolling out your Silver Sunrise documentary. So we'll put links in the description there. Did you want to tell us a bit about these resources?
I'm just smiling because it's been more challenging than I expected when I took on that documentary effort. But I think it's going to be quite rewarding to get the final product out. I'm looking for feedback. I'm sure I'm going to have people love it and people that don't, and people critique it and criticize it and all that. And I'm open to all of the input because based on that and also how well it does, I may have it in me to go ahead and make a sequel. I'm not going to say that now because I don't know, but whenever you do a new project, and I'm not a filmmaker, they're making the film. I'm not. I'm just helped produce it and got some of the ideas into it that I wanted to convey. But it's going to be interesting. And I think it'll open up sort of a new relationship with people like you that I've interviewed for many, many years, but maybe a bit of a fresh look at what I call the spiritual side of money. And breaking away from that control, kind of what we discussed today. What do you value? Do you value your inner self, your integrity, your character, your moral values, the way you treat others? Or are you more concerned with what's external to yourself that you can never get enough? I mean, if you value everything outside of yourself and really don't have that heart relationship, no amount of Ferraris or yachts or jewelry or gold is going to satisfy it.
Fantastic. Well, David, we really appreciate your time today as always, and God bless.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for July 28th through August 4th, 2025, while supplies last. This week we feature 1 ounce gold UK Britannia at just $59 over spot per ounce. 1/10 ounce gold US Eagles are just $47.99 over melt per coin. 1 ounce silver South African Krugerrand are just $2.79 over spot per ounce. And 10th ounce platinum UK Britannia are just $34 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.